Dane, appreciate the time. How you been?
I'm good. How have you been?
I've been fantastic. So I think it's safe to say that Tennessee's taking Cam Ward with the number 1 overall pick. Do you feel confident at this rate in saying that?
That's what the tea leaves say, right? I mean, obviously the Titans aren't going to come out and say who they're taking at number 1, but judging on the way they've handled this offseason, the way they've built this roster, the way that they've looked at these quarterbacks and canceled some other visits, all signs point to them picking Cam Ward at number 1 overall. And you can understand why they're coming to that conclusion when you have a chance to draft a quarterback who you believe could be realistically a top 12 to 14 quarterback in the NFL. He has that type of ability and potential. It'd be hard to pass, especially when you're the Titans. And it's been a while since you have hit on a quarterback. You know, you go back to Marcus Mariota, go back even back to Vince Young. I mean, it's been a while. I mean, I guess you could count the Ryan Tannehill years, but it's been a franchise that has been longing for a long-term answer at that position. And Cam Ward, even with a first-year general manager, second-year head coach, it feels like he is the guy that they're leaning towards. And you understand why, because if he didn't go 1, he would go 2. The Browns would be more than happy to stick there at number 2, take the quarterback. But I don't think that's going to be the case. He will be the number 1 pick. And it's more of a question, could the Giants come in with a team like that with a late offer? I don't see it. I think the Titans stick and pick. Cam Ward will be in Tennessee.
Why do you think the gap has been so distant between Cam Ward and Shedeur Sanders, in your opinion?
You know, I could go back to when you project these guys out, do you project Cam Ward as being a top 15 quarterback, a guy that can help you go to the playoffs and compete for the division, things like that? Because that's what you're looking for ultimately. The goal when you need a quarterback is not to find the next Pat Mahomes, because that's just unrealistic.
Yeah.
The goal should be find a top 15 quarterback, someone that can help you get to the playoffs, because if you get in the playoffs, you've got a shot. And so I think teams think of Cam Ward in that way, where that's not necessarily the case with Shedeur Sanders, who has the talent to start in the league, but is he truly a guy that's going to elevate everybody around you and be someone that's going to drag the team to the playoffs if that's what it takes? He's going to be very dependent on his supporting cast. And, you know, part of that is he doesn't have the top tier physical traits that ideally you want for the position. His size, the mobility, the arm strength, it's more average than above average. Now there's a lot of things to like about his profile. He's smart, he's tough, he's accurate, not quite as accurate as 74% completions would suggest. There's a lot of, 28% of his throws or his completions were screens. And so that 74% inflated a little bit, but he's still generally an accurate passer. It's just the way he wants to play. Does he have the physical traits necessary to really make that work at the next level? And that's where the question marks come in. So I think teams believe he can start. They're just not sold that, all right, this is someone that's going to elevate our offense from day one. And that's where the disconnect is. And that's why we might not see Shedeur go 2 or 3 to the Giants. Browns and Giants, 2 teams that need a quarterback. If that's the case, then where does he fall? Could it be the Saints at number 9? Could it be 20 in the Steelers? So Shedeur really will be a wild card on draft night.
And I'm not even saying I think Shedeur is going to be great. I think he could be good, very good in the NFL. But that's been the popular conversation today, Shedeur falling. And you mentioned the Saints. I've heard others mention the Steelers as well. I even heard others mention, maybe the Browns and the Giants make a pick at 2 and 3 that aren't Shedeur, and then they come back up to get him. I look at teams like the Browns at 2, the Giants at 3, and then the Raiders at 6. It's like, why not? Like, all 3 of those teams, there's legitimately a chance that all 3 are now expected to pass on Shedeur. It's just crazy to me.
And see, like I would push back a little bit on the notion that he's falling, just because, like, okay, I've been pretty consistent on my evaluation of Shedeur since the fall. I've always graded him as a late 1, early 2nd round pick. But we knew, because there is such a need for quarterbacks at the top, sometimes those guys get pushed up. Not always, but sometimes. And so when you're doing a mock draft, I think you can understand why a team like the Browns or the Giants would go that direction, because, yeah, they need somebody. But it's not necessarily just missing on the quarterback when you're picking at top 5. It's also you're passing on a Travis Hunter, an Abdul Carter, and you're passing on one of those guys. So you're potentially missing out, not just on missing a quarterback, but on a true impact player on a roster that really needs those guys. And so, and this is, the Browns have done a lot of work on Jackson Dart and Tyler Shuck and Jalen Milroe. Same, so the Giants have done as well. And so they're in a really interesting spot. And it's not all set in stone. We could still see a quarterback go 2 or 3, but I think it's more likely we see those teams go in a different direction. And then it becomes, okay, where do these quarterbacks go? And, if the over-under on quarterbacks in the first round is 2.5, I'm going to take the over. I'm going to bet on teams going with finding those quarterbacks, whether it's Jackson Dart, Tyler Shuck, whoever it may be. I think they're going to see these teams roll the dice, just maybe not in the top 5.
So obviously Dart has been talked a lot about. I would not use a first-round pick on him. I saw Jalen Milroe was invited to the draft. Just what's your evaluation, Dane Brugler, on both Jackson Dart and then also Jalen Milroe?
Yeah, I get the intrigue with Jackson Dart because I think he's going to get that Bo Nix bump where you see the physical traits, you see the intangibles off the charts. 4-year senior, so he's played a lot of football. The disconnect for me is just that Ole Miss offense. He wasn't asked to do a lot of things that he'll be asked to do in the NFL. So I think physically he has the talent for the next level. Just mentally, can he get to the backside read? Can he do full field progressions on a consistent basis? There were a lot of times where I like his mobility, but it was one read, drop my eyes, and take off. And that's just not going to work at the next level. So there is a projection involved in terms of his mental development. And that's something that I can understand taking a chance on that. But I agree with you. I would love to draft him in the second round, develop him, bring him along at his own pace. But if you're taking him, if the Steelers take him, in 21st overall or whatever, it's just that puts expectations on him. He's going to be expected to see the field pretty quickly, and it becomes, you don't want to rush the quarterback position and that development. So, and Jalen Milroe, you understand the intrigue with him because the athlete is tremendous. The arm strength, check that box. Size, check that box. It's more about, okay, can he develop the feel that's necessary to work within the pocket? Talk to some coaches, they'll tell you you can't. It's either you have it or you don't. Other coaches will say, well, we can bring you along and get you better there. So Jalen Milroe to me is the bigger risk, but it's more of a boom or bust type of pick.
I'll just throw a comparison out here for two quarterbacks. Jalen Milroe reminds me a lot like Anthony Richardson, and just in terms of there's such a high ceiling, but then the floor is so low and there's no middle ground. It's either it's all or nothing for Jalen Milroe. And then, with Shedeur Sanders, people call him brash and arrogant, and I see some of these reports. It kind of reminds me a lot of the way that we talked about Baker Mayfield. And I could see Shedeur having a little bit of a chip on his shoulder and being better than what people think. What do you make of those two comparisons?
Yeah, and I think that the off-the-field stuff with Shedeur is definitely, every team looks at it a little bit differently. And I certainly understand making that comparison. It's just on the field, you better be able to back it up. And I think that's, when you study Shedeur, the Big 12 is not exactly murderer's row when we talk about defenses, but you watch the 3 best defenses he faced last year. You're looking at Nebraska, Kansas State, BYU. It was tough. And so now part of that, his offensive line was bad. Part of it, no run game. But the quarterback's still making bad decisions and not helping things. And so that I think bringing it back to the field, that's where, you kind of struggle with the evaluation. With Milroe, I think if I understand certainly what you're saying with Anthony Richardson. I think if you like Milroe, your comparison's Jalen Hurts, who was, a late second round pick, looked at as a very raw passer, but a good athlete. You like the person, and that's kind of what Milroe is in terms of the character's off the charts. He won the academic Heisman, and you like the tools. It's going to take time. It's going to take development, and some teams might be in a position where they could go that route. Other teams, they don't have that type of patience. They need somebody that's going to show a quicker return on investment than what Jalen Milroe probably needs.
Dane Brugler here with us. When we get to Travis Hunter, how do you think, is it just dependent on what team he goes to? I don't know if you think he's going to the Browns or Giants right now, but how do you think he'll get used in the NFL?
Yeah, it's team dependent. The teams are very split on, okay, should we, because you're going to have a primary position and a secondary position. Some teams really want to see him on defense because they believe that's his best ceiling. They believe genuinely he could be a top 3 corner in the NFL. And then you try to mix in, and it's also theoretically easier if he's a full-time defensive player. And then you have a package of 25-ish plays on offense. Try to get him 8 to 10 touches every single game. And even when he's out there, it just all of a sudden the defense has to account for that. You could be a decoy on some plays. So I think that's the best route. But there are some teams, and I think the Browns are one of them, that look at it and say he's too explosive to not make him a full-time offensive player. Give me the guy that's going to help impact the scoreboard. And we know the Browns need an injection of life on that offense. And if they don't go quarterback at 2, I think they'll look at Travis Hunter, the receiver, and say, look, this is what's going to help us both now immediately and then also long term, giving us a weapon like this. And so right now where we stand, I think Travis Hunter goes 2, and I think the Browns look at him primarily as a receiver.
And then I'm assuming you then take Abdul Carter 3 with the Giants is the way that it seems like you're going?
That's the way I would turn right now. And pass rusher is not an immediate need for this team, but it's when you're drafting top 5, you draft players, not positions. You draft the impact guys, cornerstone guys. They draft, Kayvon Thibodeau's still on this team. They gave Brian Burns a lot of money last offseason, but you draft the Abdul Carter level of player who can be a true difference maker with his pass rush and everything that he brings to the field. So he makes the Giants better immediately.
Are the short arms? I'm a Patriot fan, so full disclosure, I want either Travis Hunter, I want Abdul Carter. Nothing against Will Campbell, and I love offensive linemen, but when you have those 2 players who I think are the best 2 players in the draft, Abdul Carter 1, Travis Hunter 2, I want one of them. The Pats are at 4. If this plays out, both aren't available, do you then feel like New England is definitely going to take Will Campbell, or do they get scared away from him?
No, I think that Will Campbell makes sense. And, watching Drake May last year with so little help around him and seeing the success that he still had, though, is just very encouraging for what he will be moving forward. And so I think the idea, we add Stephon Diggs to the mix. What if we add a left tackle like Will Campbell? And just worst case scenario, he struggles at left tackle. You have to move him inside to guard. It's not the worst. It's not the end of the world. It's not the worst thing because you're still going to get a really good offensive lineman. Now, ideally, yes, you want him to lock down the left tackle spot for the foreseeable future. And I think there's absolutely an outcome where that happens. It just, the shorter arms lessens that margin for error. But I think when you focus on the feet, the body control, his ability to finish consistently, he's above average across the board. And, he did it the last 30 games that he played. He gave up 2 sacks, and he played in the SEC. So he's seen a lot of football, and he's experienced enough where I think he can make that transition to left tackle. I think it makes a ton of sense at 4 for the Patriots.
When we get to Ashton Jeanty and Tyler Warren, how early can they go? I was thinking maybe you have Jeanty go to the Raiders at 6. I could see Tyler Warren maybe going as early as 7 to the Jets. If he's still on the board at 10, if I'm Chicago, I know you have Kmet, but I'd be taking Warren as well.
Yeah, I think both of those. If either one of those 2 guys are there at 10 to Chicago, I think that's the pick. Yeah, I think the idea of upgrading your offense, and when you think of Ben Johnson, he runs a lot of 12 personnel. So, think of what he did with Sam Laporta in Detroit, the ability to add that with a Tyler Warren. Yeah, I think it makes a lot of sense. It's an underrated fit that I think makes a lot of sense. And then with Jeanty, it's interesting because this is just not a great draft after those top 3 or 4 picks. And so with Jeanty, I think teams are going to look at it and say, all right, well, if I had a 1A pass rusher available, I'm taking the pass rusher, but there isn't one. So instead of taking a 1B pass rusher, let's take the 1A offensive threat, and that's Jeanty. And so even the Jaguars at 5, I wouldn't, that would not surprise me at all. The Raiders certainly at 6 make a ton of sense. So, and if somehow he gets past those 2, I don't think he's fallen past the Bears. But yeah, and I agree with you with the Jets with Tyler Warren. You could argue tight end might be their biggest need on the roster. So that just drop a guy like Tyler Warren in the mix certainly makes sense for a team that is going to try to help their young quarterback Justin Fields, try to help him out even more, not make it just the Garrett Wilson show.
Last thing I'll ask you, defensive players in this draft. We talked about Travis Hunter. We talked about Abdul Carter. The next 3 best defensive players for you to round out the top 5 best defensive players. I'm assuming Mason Graham is obviously on that list for you. Who else?
Yeah, and even Mason Graham, I think as much as I do like him, when I think of a top 5, 7 defensive tackle, I think of, Quinnen Williams and Jalen Carter and those guys. And he isn't quite on that level. So there is a little bit of a drop off, but you still like the player because he just pops off the tape consistently. After that, I really like Jalen Walker out of Georgia. Hybrid pass rusher, can do a little bit of everything. Football characters off the charts. Ideally, I'm drafting a guy like that in the mid first round, mid to late first round. But in this draft class, that's the type of guy where I'm looking at in the top 10. And then after that, I think it gets one of the pass rushers, whether it's Mike Green from Marshall, Shamar Stewart, A&M, guys that maybe have some holes in their game, but you're betting on the upside. Pass rush upside is something that teams will always chase. And I think this team or this draft has more of that upside and potential than proven production at the position, but it's not going to stop teams from going that direction.
Will Johnson, like this time last year, like after the draft wrapped up, I would see him always going in the top 5. I know he missed a lot of games this year. Where can you see Will Johnson going now?
Yeah, he's a wild card. Anywhere between 11 and say like 23, I think is where he's going to be in that range. Like you said, he's been injured, so we haven't even seen him this draft process, and that's been a big question with him is just the long speed. Are we going to see a 40-yard dash from Will Johnson? And we know it's a stopwatch position, so the tape is good. But if we don't have a 40-yard dash, and some of the teams are kind of questioning, all right, well, how injured was he throughout the year? Did he kind of mail it in and just say, all right, it's time to get ready for the draft? Those types of questions are why he might fall out of the top 15, might fall out of the top 20, but it's still a good player, still a guy that's going to be an NFL starter and contribute pretty quickly.
He's Dane Brugler. Does a great job, NFL draft writer for The Athletic, kind enough to join us on the Zach Gelb Show. Dane, appreciate it. Thank you.
Anytime. Thanks, Zach.